Welcome to SHI's Research Breakdown, where we turn complex research into quick conversations that matter to your business. Today's conversation draws on a report titled The Economic Benefits of SHI Device Lifecycle Management, which featured in the February 20th issue of the Research Roundup LinkedIn newsletter. I'm Victoria Barber, and I head up the Strategic Insights function here at SHI. Now, this week, we're discussing some research that was actually commissioned by SHI, as the title implies, from Omdia, to look at the economic benefits that are delivered by SHI's own DLM service. So I thought that I'd get Field CTO Dave Groover and Associate Vice President of End User Compute Adam Reiser to join me to discuss it. Now, Dave, you and I have had a lot of discussions about what good looks like in DLM and how to quantify and articulate the benefits of managing endpoints effectively. So it's really great to see this detailed analysis. And there are some pretty impressive numbers in terms of benefits. Were these what you expected, or did the analysis throw up any surprises for you?
I think the net impact was a little more than I thought, but the areas where the impact was felt and improved, that was pretty clear. And I think it's the idea of being very intentional and being very complete in your lifecycle management approach can have a huge difference. And it's not a silver bullet mentality. You don't do this one thing and everything improves. You've got to look at the entire lifecycle of your devices, how you select, how you finance, how you manage, how you deal with them at end of life. And doing that accurately and intentionally can have these just knock-on effects of cost reduction and better device availability and improved user experience. All these benefits come from that. It takes hard work, but it's very achievable.
Yeah, I noticed that, one of the stats that I noticed was that the TCO reduction that was quoted in there was 21%. That is a significant amount of money for the majority of organizations.
Yeah, I think the key thing about that, it comes from multiple areas, right? Just things like reducing your budget variance, not having this big seesaws and having more budget certainty. That has a direct benefit, right? Remarketing and buyback, improving, we show in that report where companies that really look carefully at how they do their buyback and their remarketing of old devices can improve the value of those devices by 20%. So instead of maybe getting $100 for a device, you get $120 for a device. Well, if it's several thousand devices you're returning, that's money that goes back to your budget that can fuel future purchases or future infrastructure improvements. All those things, the ball gets rolling in a positive direction.
And as we discussed in the previous episode, those prices for the recovered devices are going up even more. So that TCO figure on asset recovery, that may improve even further at the moment.
If you do it right. And that's the key thing, right? If you're sort of sleeping on it, these guys have been giving me $80 for $100 for these things for the last 5 years. Go challenge that. Go out and make sure you're getting the best value, right? And that's, again, being intentional at every step of the way is where you return this value, I think.
Yeah, and that amount is going up weekly right now. And, there's tons and tons of equipment out there that is just sitting dormant, that is just carrying significant residual value. And there's other, we talked in the last episode about DEX tools too. A lot of those DEX tool OEMs and ISVs are putting residual value calculators into their tool and really helping you map exactly when is the apex moment to retire and refresh that asset to get most ROI out of a new device and residual values.
And I think it's, it's sort of this mindset that people really need to take that PCs are perishable. It's like a piece of fruit, lasts a little longer, hopefully, but it really is. And so you've got to think about, while I have this device in hand, it needs to be doing work for my business. It needs to be returning value. So along with the residual value, having, every business has joiners and leavers all the time. So I get this device for this new hire, and a year in, they move on. Do I have a good plan for that device that's got several years of life left on it? Or does it end up in a closet or a basement somewhere just decaying away? I'm either paying a lease or I've spent the money, I'm getting no value. Do you have a program to get that device back out in circulation, defer the cost of another device, and extract value? Those type of targeted actions and activities and being able to measure it is where you're going to drive those savings.
To be blunt, with some people I've spoken to in the past, do you even have a plan to get the stuff back?
Yeah.
There are numerous situations where people have been told, particularly remote workers, have been told by HR that they can keep their kit
Ah.
without any
Yes, and then the security guy's head explodes. That's the whole other issue in here. It's not an economic issue, but it's a huge risk, right? And oh my gosh.
because they think that getting somebody to bring it back is going to be more expensive, and
Yeah.
monitors and printers and things like that. People forget that those have, your peripherals have value as well. It's not just the data on it. It's just not
Absolutely.
just the security, but actually, particularly if, somebody hasn't been there for very long, all those accessories and peripherals also have a value to the organization.
They have both a value, and in certain countries and in certain states of the US, they are a liability, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
If you don't dispose of these properly, you're going to put your business at risk, right? You don't want somebody to find 50 monitors on the side of the road with your company asset tag on them. That's not a good look, right? So we talk a lot about making the right decisions, purchasing new devices, making data-driven decisions, mapping that device to the persona. There's a lot of focus on the front end, as there should be, but you just can't forget the back end too, because as we've been saying, there's money to be made, and then there's liability to be mitigated, whether it's data security or appropriate disposal of assets, things like that can cause problems for the business. So again, they really got to think this through to get the full value out of their equipment and to maximize the return on those investments.
And not just the return, but to maximize productivity from the employee, right? I mean, we keep talking about the NPU and the device, but if you have an 8-year-old monitor and a 7-year-old webcam, or whatever it is sitting on your desk that you're using, those features and functionalities of the new device are become almost irrelevant from a user experience capability, right? And then your adoption rates are going to drop and your productivity rates will drop. And so it is a very key focus that, yes, the residual values and everything, that's why we're here, that's what we're talking about, but it's very important to the user experience as well if you want to get the most out of your dollar.
And I guess there's also the question of where the dollars come from. Is this capital that you've got sitting in the bank, and is this the best use of it? Are you leasing? Are you borrowing the money? How are you actually going to finance your purchases, and which is the best way for you to do that in the current economic climate?
Yeah, we're seeing a huge focus again on device as a service, desktop as a service, financing models. Great way, like we talked about. We mentioned in the last episode that it's a great way to mitigate some of these cost increases. But it really is a deeper analysis, and again, we use the word intelligent very intentionally. That doing this financially intelligently is just as important, and we're seeing a definite uptick in that to help mitigate what's going on with these supply shortages, as well as how to get the most value out of your purchase.
It's an interesting thing too, because from the financing or, CapEx, OpEx world, I always was of the mind, there should just be one way to do this, but there really isn't. Every business has their own rules, how they want to use their money as, service providers, financiers, et cetera. We want to provide the flexibility to meet that customer where they are and help them make that decision. What's the best use of your money, the way you account for it across your enterprise, et cetera. It's always fascinating that one customer will come and say, I absolutely need to use capital for this. I never want to do it by expense. And the other customer, you could just swivel your head and they're like, oh my God, I would never use capital. I would always expense it. And their thresholds are different. And so you've really got to understand that and also keep examining that within your business. Are we maximizing our money towards this goal of equipping our employees with the tools to do their job? And it's not a static thing. I think that's the key thing here. And as we talked about in our last episode as well, the landscape's constantly changing. You need to constantly be reevaluating how you're financing, deploying, recovering, choosing. It's just always changing, and there's always opportunity to take advantage of the changes.
And then when you've got international organizations, obviously you've got the whole currency hedging thing to bring into it as well.
Yep.
Mhm.
And, the where do you source things from a logistics perspective as well, because you're not going to necessarily source things all in the same place, in the same currency. You've got to work out where you're shipping things to. All comes into what the right thing to do is and when is the right time to do it. The more you look at it, the more complicated this gets for something that we rely on and think of as being a really basic function of an organization, which is getting something on my desk that means I can do my job.
And I think that gets right back to what this report points out. If you just let's just go get PCs, you're not optimizing. And if you think it through, again, it goes back to that 21% TCO benefit. That's a huge difference between just doing it and doing it right.
So, Dave, one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past is this tendency people have, and I think it's a procurement behavior that's been encouraged because get the biggest discount you can, right? So buy as many things for this project or this refresh as we possibly can in one go, regardless of when we plan to deploy them, and whether it's a good idea to buy them all up front and get that big discount, but then not use them for 6 months. Or in the case of some projects, never use them at all.
Yeah, that's the painful one. Yeah, we did some modeling and it was fascinating. I've always had this in the back of my head. And luckily, like where I came from, we leased, so it really wasn't a big part of it. But I saw it a lot when I moved to SHI, where, companies that purchase, they tend to make a large purchase at the first of the year. Some of them will do a twice annual purchase. Some will do a quarterly purchase. But some IT shops, finance says, here's $10 million, get what you need for the year. And especially these days, they'll forward buy because of their concern about price impacts. But that may not always be right because, again, then you go break down. If I'm going to pay $1,000 for this device and I'm going to keep it for 4 years, it's about, $20 a month or so that costs you. Well, that buy forward, and maybe I got an extra 3% discount on the price because I did this bulk buy. If you don't get those devices deployed within, I think in that model, it's like 4 months, you've lost your savings because of the decay of those devices. And especially things like warranty start dates that happen upon ship versus upon receipt. All those things compound in it. So you've really got to think about, is my purchasing model correct? Does my deployment model map my purchasing model? Maybe it's great. Hey, buy it all up front. But you better be armed with the bodies and the systems and the workflows to get those devices in people's hands quickly to start extracting value. You got this great new Copilot PC or this Apple M5 or the Snapdragon X that's got all this capability. Well, if it's just sitting in the closet while the person continues to use their 5-year-old machine, what have you done? And so it's really important to think that through.
Yeah, I think with the volatility of the market and the job market as well, you need to be able to balance the two of buying ahead, yet making sure that you're not overbuying and things are sitting there rotting away. I think your warranty point is key. And, some of the other things. What if the device is DOA and you don't know for 6 months or 7 months?
Yeah.
Too bad. There's not much we can do at that point, right? There's windows on these things. There's timelines on these things that you need to make sure. And then, there's cost to just storing devices. It has to be done securely. You got to make sure that someone's manning and watching these, that it's tracked. There's overhead costs to that if it's just purchased and sits there, it's not like it's collecting dust and not costing you anything. There's real costs to just storage. And so there is a fine-tuned balance between business needs and financial needs that needs to be found. And bulk buying in January for something I might need in December, not necessarily the right move.
Not optimal. I think, Adam, that point about storing and security, and retail, the term for that, retail stores, they call that shrinkage, right? Inventory that goes missing, which in somebody's pocket or something. And we see that all the time with customers. And a lot of customers, and it makes sense, they'll do these bulk buys and then they'll distribute them at their major locations, right? So they'll be ready to go. But now you're managing in multiple places, and we see it all the time, sometimes over 2% loss rates. Okay, again, if you lose 2%, and you do this bulk buy and you save 3%, you just narrowed that margin plus the shelf rot. So it's really important to think that through. And again, it just goes back to this idea, you've got to be very intentional and you've got to go through every step of the life cycle to think about how are we doing this? How are we purchasing? How are we storing? How are we deploying? How quickly are we deploying? How are we recovering? How are we redeploying? All those steps done correctly have a huge impact. Done sort of haphazardly, you're just not going to get the value.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our listeners. You can find details of the research we've discussed in the show notes, and you can find more episodes of the research breakdown, including other episodes discussing the impact of the memory shortage, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can sign up to the research roundup on SHI's LinkedIn page. SHI Media. You heard it here.